This is the gospel reading according to John. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. And the two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrapping, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he said and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture, but he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood there weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. And they said to him, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And they said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that he was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will go and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to the Father and your Father, to God, and to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord. And she told them and that they had said these things to her.
Well, it's Easter. I've got about 5 minutes to say and 20 minutes to say it in, so I need to stall for a few minutes. If you're visiting, this is not a dress-up church. You might have heard that, and then you're like, well, what's going on today? So on Easter, I feel like maybe it would be wise to give you some advice if you don't already know it. If you have the blues, and I don't mean the kind that I like to get when I'm playing my guitar, but the kind that gets you down, if you're depressed like my family has been lately and don't mind admitting, please remember a few things. Don't sit in the dark. Turn on a light. I catch my family doing that. Don't sit in the dark. Turn on a light. Don't get hungry. Eat something. Turn on some music, or my goodness, open a window and let some sunlight in. Sunlight is good for just about everybody. If you're not doing those things and you're doing the things that I have asked you not to do, then you are not participating in being well. You are still in a place where you are enjoying the blues. So try that. I'll tell you that because the reason I dressed up today was because I told my family we're going to make an Easter picture. We're going to look happy if we're happy or not. So now for some of you, you might not be happy in a pink shirt and a Jerry Garcia tie, but I'm happy today. So that's a good thing to do. Experiencing Easter is kind of what I want to talk about today. And another thing I want to say is, I don't know why, but it seems like on Easter Sunday we decorate more. We pick what we hope are really good songs, and we work on a really good sermon, and we do baptisms, and I think we try to do things a little different than we do them on other Sundays, and I don't really know why we do that, because if you're visiting and you come back next week and it looks different, it's because we didn't do our normal thing on Easter. Maybe we should be a little bit more like our Sunday by Sunday experience on Easter, so if you visit, you'll know what to expect when you come back. By the way, if you come back next week, it won't look anything like today. Ronnie will be preaching next week, and there's an alternative band and a praise team, and there are different people who are going to be up here and leading worship. I hope you'll come. I hope you'll have an open mind. If you come 2 weeks from today, it won't look like today, because it's Youth Sunday, and every month that there's a fifth Sunday, and there are 4 of those every year, we have always, since the very beginning, allowed our youth to bring us their honest expression of worship without too many rules or too much guidance. So it'll be different in 2 weeks. I hope you'll come. It's important to them that you're here. They need the encouragement. And then when you get through those 2 weeks and you've experienced 3 Sundays in a row that aren't really like Wylie Christian Church, I hope you'll come back in 3 weeks when I will be here in the pulpit again, and I'll return to the lectionary and preach what I hope will be a normal sermon, and we'll have a normal worship service. We read today about the experience of Easter Sunday. We read today in the text that you heard Esteban bring a moment ago about 3 people who had an experience early on Easter morning. Mary goes to the tomb with some other women, but the other women get forgotten pretty quick because they run back and inform the disciples that something is happening. There is an out of the ordinary experience going on at the tomb of Jesus. And so it is that 3 characters assemble and head back toward the tomb. There's Peter, and then there is, we assume, John, who is identified as the disciple whom Jesus loved. And then there is Mary. And I wonder what kind of experience that you're having today. You know, the 2 guys in the story, and this is not a statement about men and women, but it's a statement about the characters of Peter and John. I think that they're having an experience that's bound up in trying to find the answers. They're staring into the tomb and trying to make sense out of what they see. The text says that they still do not understand. And I don't know how many Easter Sundays I approached the tomb in the same way. If I'm good enough, faithful enough, if I study hard enough, if I believe hard enough, and I say it over and over, surely God will help me to understand. I wonder if you came here today on Easter Sunday looking for some answers, or maybe just one answer about something that is troubling you. And then there is Mary. Mary's response is different. She doesn't seek answers, but she opens her heart and begins to weep. And so Jesus encounters Mary as she is sobbing, as she is emotional and pouring herself out over the death and the absence of the body of her Lord and Savior. The same Jesus that will soon invite the doubting disciples to place their fingers in his wounds looks at the weeping Mary and says, "Do not hold on to me." Now Mary seems to interrupt Jesus' resurrection, maybe like mid-resurrection or something. I don't know what's happening, but there's nothing in the tomb. And then these competitive disciples have a foot race and one ups the other, so when the other one gets there, he ups the other one right back by charging into the tomb. And then they leave. And we're told there's nothing there until Mary looks in. In fact, the first time she's looked in. And she sees two angels, radiant and glowing. And then turning around outside the tomb, she encounters the risen Jesus, whom she thinks is the gardener. Do not hold on to me. It doesn't even look like she's reached for him. She's just weeping. Do not hold on to me. You know, earlier in John's gospel, there's a resurrection story that involves another Mary, one of Jesus' dear friends, Mary, the sister of Martha, and the two sisters of Lazarus, whom Jesus raised from the dead. I've always thought that story had a really bad ending because, you know, I think that one of the things that we have to work the hardest on in our life is dying. We're going to get there someday. And none of us, I think, are really looking forward to it. I don't know about you, but for me, my entire life is a struggle to get ready to let go. And I see poor old Lazarus having finally made the journey. But then when Jesus arrives at the tomb of Lazarus, his two sisters are overwhelmed with grief, and they finally convince Jesus to call Lazarus forward from the grave. It looks like a triumphant scene, and certainly John's gospel presents it as one. Jesus is triumphant over death. But if I'm Lazarus, when Jesus leaves, I think I want to corner my two sisters and say, what were you thinking? I finally got over to the other side, and now you call me back here, and I've got to do this again. It's hard enough to die once, but to die twice, I'm not signing up for that retreat. I think about dying, don't you? I mean, I don't fear it, but I think about it. I always tell my children it's the last thing that I will do for you. I leave you this one last example, and I hope that I don't make a fool of myself when the moment arrives. My wife sometimes screams at me in traffic when we encounter a near accident. Thanks to my father, I'm pretty good at steering out of accidents. But I look at my wife and say, why were you screaming? And she says, we could have been killed. And I say, can we die with some dignity, not screaming our heads off, please? For me, there's dignity in the art of letting go. And now I'm not hurrying, and I'm not hurrying any of you. I love all of you. As I look around the room, I want to see all of you next Easter, next Sunday, hint, hint. But someday, if not every day, God calls upon us to embrace the art of letting go. Maybe the best way to think about it is when you teach your children to ride a bicycle. Now, dads, if you've been holding on to that seat, mom, whoever, and the time comes to let go, admit it. You want them to fall. The last thing you want is for them to keep riding and not even need you anymore. The very last thing you want them to do is look back and say, look, Dad, I can do it by myself. Those are not a father's favorite words to hear. What goes through my mind in that moment is not just, she's riding a bike. But oh my goodness, there's college. There's marriage. Maybe divorce. Or the military. Life is a whole lot of letting go. She's not mine to hang on to. You know the old saying, when you love something, let it go. If it comes back to you, it is truly yours. If it does not, it was never yours. In the most intimate relationships in your life, mine would be with my wife. This relationship is a delicate dance between the commitment to stay and the need for one another and the freedom to leave. Love is not unconditional until we give someone permission to break our hearts. Even in church, we work and work to build a congregation, and we work and work to have the church that we feel is honoring God. And yet, what are we doing but building something to leave to the next generation? It's said so often that the children are the future of our church, of the church, of congregations. And so it is that we work hard to give this thing away. My mentor, Tony Salisbury, told me that a good minister always has his resignation papers in his hip pocket. I thought, well, that's a pretty good bargaining tool at salary raise time. But that's not what he meant when he said, Doug, it's important that the congregation outlive your time there as minister. We as parents and as ministers and as disciples of Jesus are constantly working ourselves out of a job. Richard Rohr calls it the path of descent. He points out that Christianity is not a religion, or it's not just a doctrine, and it's not a system of faith where we achieve by learning more and by accomplishing more, and we receive accolades and badges of honor until we have risen to the top. But instead, the disciples' path is a path of descent. For Jesus calls us over and over to sell everything and to give it away. He calls us to be dead to ourselves, to lose our lives that we might find them, and to empty ourselves and be broken for the sake of others. Philip Yancey once wrote about the Midnight Church. That was his name for NA and AA groups, recovery groups that meet in various places, many of them in the dark of night, some inside church buildings. And as churches open the halls and the rooms of their facilities to these people, still the statistic is that most folks in the recovery community do not have a church home to attend. And once Philip Yancey interviewed a recovering alcoholic and asked, why do you think it is that recovery people don't go to church? And his comment was that we don't find dependent people there. You see, we go and the pastor's all dressed up in his Sunday best, and all of the people have put on their best face, and when you ask people how things are, they give you the standard, everything is really fine answer. And he said that it's us, the addicts in this world, who know what life is like to be dependent upon God and upon one another for just 5 minutes of sobriety. It's a good thing when God breaks a congregation to the point of desperation and dependence upon God. It's not the end of the congregation. It is the beginning of a resurrected body that we could not make for ourselves. There's a good message in here. Hold on to one another. Hold tightly to one another, because we are all that each other have in this life. God is not having problems with the dead, in case you haven't noticed. It's the living that God is trying to reach. I don't even think God has trouble forgiving the dead. I think it is the living whom God desires to hear the cry, "Forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned." Hold on to one another. But as for God, as for the plan for salvation, and as for your great mind which has pieced all of this together, and the power that you have gained from all of this, please be willing to let go and hear the words of Jesus. Do not hold on to me. For God never changes, but power is transferred. And plans, even the plan for salvation, is adapted and evolves over time. The God that we know today must be let go of so that we can encounter the God who is calling us like Jesus from beyond our grave. For those who were here during Lent, we did some difficult work. It didn't seem hard at the time, but replacing negative pieces of our daily talk with positive words proved to be a challenge to me, and I'm sure to others. But during the Easter season, that is when God takes those kind of sacrifices and that foundation, and during the Easter season is when God applies life to the dead places. So I remind you today, there are 7 Sundays in Easter. I invite you to join us for the next 6 as we watch for what God is doing to honor the work and the sacrifice that we made during Lent. Will you pray with me?